My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 36 years old. I live in a one-bedroom rental on the east side of Asheville, North Carolina, and I have spent the last 11 years of my life sitting with people while they die. I'm a hospice nurse. It's not a job most people understand. They ask me how I can stand it, and I tell them the truth, which is that the dying are usually kinder than the living. They tell you what they wish they'd done. They hold your hand. They thank you for small things, like a cool washcloth or the way you say their name. By the time someone is in hospice, the pretending is over. There's no energy left for cruelty. I wish I could say the same about my family. I'm the middle child. Mason is 3 years older. Tessa is 5 years younger. Growing up in our white farmhouse on Linville Road, I was the one who set the table, packed the lunches, and learned to fold a fitted sheet by the time I was 9. Mason was the prince. Tessa was the baby. I was the help. My mother used to say it like it was a compliment. Claire's so capable. She doesn't need as much as the others. I believed her for a long time. I believed her when she said it was fine that I worked 2 jobs through nursing school, while Mason went to state on my parents' dime. I believed her when she said Tessa needed the family car more than I did because she was still finding herself. I believed her when she called me at 2 in the morning, crying about her diagnosis, and I drove the 43 minutes from my apartment to their kitchen and held her while she shook. I believed her every single Monday for 3 years when I picked her up at 7 a.m. and drove her to chemo and sat in the waiting room and brought her ginger ale because the nurses had taught me which flavors didn't make her sick. I believed her right up until that phone call in the hospice parking lot. But there was one person in our family who never believed her, and that was Grandma Ruth. Ruth saw me. Ruth saw all of us, actually, with those sharp gray eyes that didn't miss anything. And the summer before she died, sitting on the back porch of the farmhouse with a glass of sweet tea going warm in her hand, she told me something I had spent 8 years trying not to think about. Before I tell you what she said, though, I want to do something first. Before I go any further into this story, I want to stop for a moment and just talk to you. I don't know where you are right now. Maybe you're in your kitchen, washing dishes after a long day. Maybe you're driving home from a shift that took more out of you than you wanted to admit. Maybe you're lying in bed in the dark, listening through one earbud, so you don't wake the person beside you. Wherever you are, I'm glad you're here. Tell me, honestly, where are you listening from today? Are you in the United States like me? Are you in Canada, the UK, Australia, South Africa, the Philippines, India, Nigeria, Jamaica, Ireland, or somewhere I've never been but would love to hear about? Write your country in the comments. I read them, every single one. And when I have the time, I try to write back, because the people who listen to these stories aren't strangers to me. They feel like company. And let me ask you something else, because I think you might understand this story more than most. Have you ever been the person everyone in your family called when something went wrong, but the person nobody called when things were going right? Have you ever been treated like the useful one instead of the loved one? Have you ever sat at a holiday dinner and realized, halfway through dessert, that you were the only one who didn't get asked a single question about your own life? If you have, tell me. Write your country and write your story in the comments. You don't have to use your real name. You don't have to explain it perfectly. Just say it. Sometimes saying it once, even to strangers, is the first time a person feels seen. And if stories like this one speak to something inside you, something tender or angry or healing, then go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I promise you, this story is only beginning, and what's coming will surprise you. Now let me take you back to the white farmhouse on Linville Road, back to my grandmother Ruth on the back porch with sweet tea going warm in her hand, back to the summer everything quiet became loud. The Bennett house sat on 6 acres at the bend of Linville Road, just outside Black Mountain. My grandmother Ruth bought it in 1962 with money she saved working as a bookkeeper for a furniture company in Hickory. She bought it alone. My grandfather was already gone by then, taken by a stroke at 41, and Ruth had decided she was not going to spend her life renting from men who raised the rent every spring. So she signed the deed in her own name, in tight blue cursive, and she planted dogwoods along the driveway that took 20 years to bloom. The house was white clapboard with a wraparound porch and green shutters my grandfather had picked out before he died. There was a hand pump well in the side yard that nobody used anymore, but Ruth refused to remove. There was a pecan tree in the back that dropped nuts in October and made my mother complain about the squirrels. There was a smell to that house, beeswax and cedar and something like old paper, that I could still bring up in my mind 8 years after Ruth was gone. My mother, Diane, grew up in that house. She left it at 18 for community college in Asheville, met my father Walter at a church mixer, and married him in the front yard under a white tent 2 summers later. My father was a quiet man who sold insurance for 31 years and never once raised his voice in our house. He didn't have to. My mother raised hers for both of them. Diane was the kind of woman who ran the church bake sale and remembered every neighbor's birthday and never let anyone see her without lipstick. She volunteered for the hospital auxiliary. She sat on the board at First Methodist. She got mentioned in the local paper twice a year for one charitable thing or another, and she kept the clippings in a leather album on the coffee table where guests would see them. In public, my mother was warmth itself. She hugged the church ladies. She praised other people's children. She told the cashier at the Ingalls to have a blessed day. In private, she was a different animal. I learned that early. I learned it the first time I brought home a B+ in fourth grade math and watched her face fall like I had slapped her. I learned it the night she made me practice piano for 2 hours because Mason had a recital coming up and the family needed to sound polished. I learned it every time she introduced Tessa as her miracle baby and introduced me as her helper. Mason was the prince of that farmhouse. Tall, blonde like our father, easy in a way that fooled people. He could break a window with a baseball at 12 years old and convince our mother by dinner that it was somehow Tessa's fault. He grew up into a real estate agent in Charlotte, the kind who wears a vest and posts photos in front of houses he didn't actually sell. He had a wife named Brittany and 2 kids and a smile that worked on bank tellers. Tessa was the baby. 5 years younger than me, soft-edged, sweet on the surface, and absolutely certain the world had been built specifically for her comfort. She had become a lifestyle influencer, which mostly meant she filmed herself drinking iced coffee and called it work. She had married a man named Cody Hale the summer before, a wedding my parents paid for in full while telling me they couldn't afford to help with my student loans. And then there was me, the middle one, the capable one, the one who showed up. I want to be careful here, because I don't want to make myself sound like a saint. I wasn't a saint. I was tired, and I was lonely, and a lot of the things I did for my family I did, because I didn't yet know how to stop. But I want you to understand the shape of our house before I tell you what happened in it. Because the shape of a family, the quiet patterns nobody talks about at Thanksgiving, is usually where the betrayal grows. In our house, the pattern was simple. Mason got the money. Tessa got the attention. I got the work. And Grandma Ruth, sitting in her wheelchair by the bay window, saw every bit of it. The first Monday I drove my mother to chemo. She cried in the passenger seat for 9 miles, and then asked me to stop at Bojangles so she could get a biscuit. That was Diane. She could weep about her own mortality and pivot to breakfast in the same breath. I pulled into the drive-thru and ordered her a sausage biscuit and a sweet tea, and she ate it with her hands shaking, and I pretended not to notice. The diagnosis had come in March of 2021. Stage 2 breast cancer, treatable, but the kind of treatable that takes a year of your life and most of your hair. The oncologist's office was in West Asheville, 43 minutes from my apartment and 26 minutes from my parents' house, and somehow it was decided, without anybody actually deciding, that I would be the one to drive her. Mason lived in Charlotte. He sent a card. He sent flowers twice. He called on Mother's Day and on her birthday and exactly never in between. Tessa lived 19 minutes away and ran an Instagram account where she posted a photo of my mother in a pink ribbon shirt the day after the diagnosis with the caption, "My hero. My queen. Praying for healing." She got 800 likes. She did not come to a single chemo appointment. I went to 23. I have the dates written down in a little black notebook I kept in the glove compartment of my Corolla. March 22, April 5, April 19. All the way through to the last one in February of 2022, when my mother rang the bell in the infusion suite and the nurses clapped and Tessa drove up, just in time to film the moment for her followers. I have a photograph somewhere of Tessa hugging our mother by the bell, both of them crying, and you cannot see me in the frame because I was the one holding the phone. I paid for things too. Not because anyone asked. Because I was there, and the bills were there, and somebody had to. The co-pays were $45 a visit. The anti-nausea pills weren't covered by her supplemental. The wig she picked out at the boutique on Merriman was $320, and she cried in the parking lot afterward and said she felt like a clown. And I told her she looked beautiful, and I paid the woman at the counter with my debit card. I kept the receipt. I kept all of them. A year and a half later, when my father's kidneys started failing, I did it again. Dialysis on Thursdays. 3 hours in a vinyl chair while he watched Fox News on a wall, mounted television, and barely spoke to me. I brought him crossword books. I brought him peppermints because the treatment made his mouth taste like metal. I drove him home and helped him up the porch steps and made sure there was soup in the freezer for the nights my mother was too tired to cook. Mason sent a card. Tessa posted a reel. I want you to understand something about being the useful daughter. It doesn't feel like sainthood. It feels like a slow erosion of yourself, like a shoreline being eaten by tide you can't see moving. You stop dating because your weekends belong to other people's appointments. You stop sleeping a full night because you're listening for the phone. You stop telling your friends about your week because your week is just other people's diagnoses. And the worst part isn't even the work. The worst part is that the people you're doing it for stop seeing you as a daughter and start seeing you as a service. My mother said it to me once, in the car, the spring she finished chemo. We were driving back from her last oncology follow-up. She was tired and grateful and a little high on the relief of being told no evidence of disease. She looked over at me and patted my hand on the gear shift and said, "You're so good at this, Claire. It's really your gift, taking care of people. It's what you were made for." I smiled. I said thank you. But something inside me went very, very quiet. Because I had been waiting, I think, for her to say something else. For her to say thank you for the year of your life you gave me. For her to say I see what this cost you. For her to say I love you, and I'm sorry it had to be you. Instead, she had said it was my gift, like the universe had assigned me to her care the way you assign a nurse to a shift, like I was equipment. I dropped her off at the house. I drove home. I sat on my own couch in my own quiet apartment and I cried for 40 minutes. And then I got up and made myself a sandwich and went to work the next morning, because that is what useful daughters do. You want to know the thing nobody told me? That the people who treat you like a service will be furious the day you start charging for it. They want it free, and they want it eternal, and they want you to smile while you give it. And the moment you ask for anything back, anything at all, even just to be remembered in a will, you become the difficult one. The dramatic one. The one who's making things ugly. But I wasn't the only one watching all of this. There was somebody else in the house. Somebody nobody really looked at anymore, and she was paying very close attention. Grandma Ruth had moved into the farmhouse full-time the summer of 2017. She was 86 then, sharp as a tack, but unsteady on her feet, and her own little house in town had become too much. My mother framed it as a generous gesture. We're bringing Mama home with us, where she can be cared for. The truth, which I figured out within a month, was that my mother wanted Ruth where she could be managed. Ruth had money. Not a fortune, but enough. She had the farmhouse, which she still legally owned, though my mother had stopped mentioning that part somewhere around 2015. She had a small brokerage account my grandfather had started in 1968 and Ruth had never touched. She had Social Security and a pension from the furniture company, and a will, everyone assumed, that left everything to her only daughter. What Ruth also had was a wheelchair, a hearing aid she rarely admitted to using, and a habit of sitting by the bay window in the front room with a book in her lap that she wasn't really reading. She watched. She watched Mason come over at Christmas and ask my mother for a loan in the kitchen. She watched Tessa try on Ruth's pearls in the hallway mirror without asking. She watched my mother count out Ruth's pills every morning and tell her, "You don't need to worry about any of this, Mama." She watched me show up every Sunday with groceries and a casserole and a refilled prescription, and stay too late and leave too tired. That last summer, the summer of 2017, Ruth asked me to push her chair out onto the back porch one August afternoon. The pecan tree was dropping early. The air smelled like cut grass and approaching rain. My mother was at a church luncheon, and my father was watching golf in the den, and the house was as quiet as it ever got. Ruth had a glass of sweet tea going warm on the little table beside her, and she reached over and put her hand on mine, and her hand was so thin I could feel every bone. "Claire," she said. "I see you, sweetheart. I see all of it." I thought she meant the chemo. I thought she meant the groceries. I thought she meant the way I had bandaged her shin 2 weeks before when she'd scraped it on the wheelchair. Thank you, Grandma? She shook her head slow. No, you're not hearing me. I see it. The way they use you. The way she lets them. I didn't know what to say. I just held her hand. When the time comes, Ruth said, looking out at the pecan tree instead of at me, you remember that I saw you. You remember that, Claire. Promise me? I promised. 6 weeks later, she died in her sleep. The funeral was at First Methodist. My mother wore black chainmail she'd bought for the occasion and cried beautifully in the front pew. Mason gave a eulogy he had clearly written in the car. Tessa posted a tribute reel with sepia filters. I was the one who cleaned out Ruth's bedroom afterward, alone, while my mother told the church ladies how devastated she was. I assumed, like everyone else, that the farmhouse and everything in it had gone to my mother. Ruth's only daughter. Her only logical heir. Nobody at the funeral mentioned a will reading. Nobody mentioned a lawyer. My mother said the words Mama left everything to me, as she should have, and nobody questioned it, least of all me. But Ruth had said when the time comes. I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. I tucked her words away in the same place I tucked everything I didn't have the energy to think about, and I went back to my life, and I kept being the useful daughter for 8 more years. I should have understood sooner. Ruth never said anything by accident. The truck showed up in the driveway on a Saturday in May of 2019, 2 years almost to the day after Ruth's funeral. Mason had driven it down from Charlotte specifically so my parents could admire it. I happened to be there because I'd come over to change the filter on the furnace, a job my father used to do before his hands started shaking. It was a Ford F-250, navy blue, with chrome trim and leather seats and a sticker still in the back window. Mason was leaning against it like a man in a commercial when I pulled up. My mother was standing on the porch with her hand pressed to her chest the way some women do when they're trying to look overwhelmed. 52,000, Mason was saying when I got out of my Corolla, fully loaded, heated seats. The works? Oh, Mason, my mother said. It's beautiful. Walter, isn't it beautiful? My father, sitting on the porch swing, nodded without looking up. Mason saw me and grinned. Hey sis. What do you think? I thought a lot of things. I thought about the fact that Mason had told me at Christmas he was struggling with his mortgage. I thought about the fact that Brittany had quit her teaching job in the fall and Mason had complained for an entire dinner about how expensive their kids' preschool was. I thought about how my own car was a 2014 Toyota with 140,000 miles on it, and a check engine light that came on every time it rained. It's nice, I said. Nice. My mother laughed like I'd insulted the Pope. Claire, it's gorgeous. He worked so hard for this. I went inside to change the furnace filter. I didn't think much more about the truck until October, when Tessa got engaged to Cody Hale. The proposal happened at the Grove Park Inn, on the terrace at sunset, and Cody had hired a photographer to capture the entire thing, which Tessa then edited into a 3-minute reel set to a Taylor Swift song. The ring was a 2.5-carat oval on a pave band. I know because Tessa told everyone within hearing distance the exact specifications, including the cashier at Harris Teeter, and the woman who did her nails. The wedding was set for the following June. Tessa announced over Sunday dinner that the venue was going to be Biltmore Estate. The Lioncrest, specifically. 140 guests. A string quartet for the ceremony. A 9-piece band for the reception. A custom Monique Lhuillier gown. I did the math in my head while my mother served the pot roast. The venue alone was going to be north of $40,000. The dress was probably 12. The flowers, the food, the band, the photographer, the videographer, the welcome bags, the rehearsal dinner. I was looking at $100,000 wedding, easily, maybe more. That's a lot of wedding, I said carefully. Cody's parents are contributing, Tessa said. How much? She blinked at me. Excuse me? How much are they contributing? Because that wedding's going to be 6 figures, Tess. Don't be tacky, Claire. Cody's family is being generous. I looked at my mother. My mother was very busy passing the green beans. I let it go. I let a lot of things go in those years. I was working 60-hour weeks at the hospice, picking up extra shifts because Mason had stopped pretending to help with our parents' bills and Tessa had never started. My mother's supplemental insurance had a deductible that reset every January, and my father's dialysis center kept sending invoices that somehow ended up on my kitchen table. I paid them. I told myself I was being a good daughter. I told myself love looked like this. But the wedding bothered me. It bothered me for months. And one Tuesday in February, sitting at my parents' kitchen table, while my mother napped on the couch, I noticed something I wasn't supposed to notice. There was a mortgage statement on the table. The farmhouse had been paid off in 1994. I knew because Ruth had thrown a little party for herself, just her and me with a sheet cake from Ingles. She had been so proud. Nobody can take this house now, Claire, nobody. But the statement on the table that Tuesday afternoon had a balance on it. $87,000, drawn on a home equity line of credit, originated in November of 2019. A month after Tessa's engagement, I sat very still. I memorized the lender's name. I memorized the account number. I memorized the date. I did not pick up the statement, because some part of me already knew it was important not to touch it, not to leave a fingerprint, not to give my mother any reason to put it somewhere I couldn't find it again. I just looked at it the way you look at a snake on a trail. When my mother woke up from her nap, I asked her, as casually as I could, "Mom, did you and Dad take out a loan on the house?" She didn't blink. She picked up the statement and slid it under a stack of catalogs in one smooth motion and said, "Just a small thing for some repairs. Don't worry about it. 87,000 is a small thing. You weren't supposed to be looking at my mail, Claire. It was on the table. Don't make this a thing. Mason and Tessa have families to build. Your father and I are trying to help them get started. You wouldn't understand. You have yourself. You had phrase again. You have yourself." I drove home that night and I sat in my car in the apartment lot for 20 minutes before I went inside. Because I had finally heard what my mother kept telling me, and I had finally understood what it meant. You have yourself didn't mean you're independent. It meant you're alone, and we are using that against you. I started keeping records, not deliberately at first, just instinctively. I kept the texts where my mother asked me to pay for her prescriptions and promised to pay me back. I kept the screenshots of the Venmo requests I'd sent that were never honored. I kept the photographs of grocery receipts where I'd bought my father's diabetic supplies. I kept the dialysis invoices I'd covered. I started a folder in my closet, a literal shoebox, because I'm a 36-year-old woman who still keeps important things in shoeboxes. The wedding happened that June, exactly as Tessa had described. The Lion Crest at Biltmore. 140 guests. A Monique Lhuillier gown, a string quartet. I wore a navy dress from Macy's and danced with my father, who held me at arm's length and didn't quite meet my eyes. I gave Tessa a card with a check for $500 inside, which was more than I could afford. She opened it at the gift table and made a face I will remember for the rest of my life. 3 months later, my mother called me in the hospice parking lot and told me I had been written out of the will. I drove home from that parking lot with my hands at 10 and 2 and my jaw locked so tight my back teeth ached. I let myself into my apartment. I put my keys in the bowl by the door. I took off my scrubs and put them straight in the wash, because hospice scrubs go straight in the wash, no exceptions. I poured myself a glass of red wine I had been saving for a better night. And then I walked to the hall closet and pulled down the shoebox. It was heavier than I remembered. 8 years of paper has weight to it. I carried it to the kitchen table and I sat down and I put my hand flat on the lid. Underneath everything in that box, at the very bottom, was an envelope I had not opened in 8 years. My grandmother Ruth's handwriting on the front. "Claire," it said, "only if you need it." I had put it in the box the week after her funeral, and I had never been able to bring myself to open it. Some superstitious part of me had thought that opening it would mean Ruth was really gone. Some other part of me, the part that had spent 8 years being the useful daughter, had thought it was probably just a sentimental note, and I should save it for a harder day. This was a harder day. I took the envelope out. I held it for a long minute. I thought about Ruth on the back porch with her sweet tea going warm. "When the time comes, you remember I saw you." I picked up the kitchen scissors and I slid them under the flap. Before I tell you what was in Ruth's letter, I need to tell you what was in the rest of the box. Because the letter mattered. The letter changed everything, but the box mattered too. The box was 8 years of proof that I had not imagined any of it. On top was the most recent layer. The texts I had been screenshotting for the past 2 years, printed out at the FedEx on Tunnel Road, because I didn't trust my phone not to lose them in some update. "Claire, can you pick up Dad's metformin? He's out, and I don't want to make the trip." "Claire, your father needs a ride Thursday. Mason is busy." "Claire, I forgot my purse. Can you cover the pay? I'll get you back 47 of them by my count. The Venmo requests I'd sent in response, marked unfulfilled. Mom 45, Mom 86, Mom to 112. She had read every single one. She had paid back none of them. Below the texts were the receipts. Walgreens, CVS, Ingalls, the dialysis center's little supply window. The medical supply store on Patton Avenue where I bought my father's compression socks. I had stapled them in groups of 10 with little post-it notes on top, dated by month. Some part of me, even back then, had been preparing for something. Preparing without knowing what for. People who grow up the way I grew up. People who get called dramatic for naming what is actually happening to them. Learn to keep paper. The paper does the talking when nobody will listen. Below the receipts were the gas logs. A little spiral notebook with mileage written in my own handwriting. Asheville to Black Mountain to West Asheville Oncology, West Asheville Oncology back to Black Mountain back to Asheville, 26 miles, 43 miles, 43 miles, times 23, plus the dialysis runs, plus the pharmacy runs, plus the emergency room run the night my father fell in the bathroom, and my mother called me at 1 in the morning instead of an ambulance because she didn't want the neighbors to see lights. Below the gas logs were the voicemails. I had not actually put voicemails in the box, of course, but I had a list, in a different notebook, of every voicemail my mother had left me asking for help, with the dates and the durations. I had saved the audio files to a flash drive that lived in the box because I did not trust the cloud. The night I was sitting at that kitchen table with the shoebox open, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop and I clicked on one at random. Claire, it's Mom. Your father had a bad night. I need you to come over before work and help me get him to the bathroom. He won't let me do it. I don't know what's wrong with him. Just come. Please come, Claire. I had gone. Of course I had gone. I had been at their house by 5:15 the next morning, in scrubs, with coffee for both of us, and I had gotten my father to the bathroom and back to bed. And my mother had thanked me by saying, "You smell like a hospital. You should shower before you go to work." I closed the laptop. I drank the rest of the wine. The middle layer of the box was older. The 2019 mortgage statement was not in there, because I had not been brave enough to take it. But I had written down the lender's name and the account number on an index card the day I saw it, and the index card was in the box. I had written it in pencil, in tiny letters, the way you write something when you are afraid of being caught writing it. Below the index card were screenshots of my parents' Christmas card from 2020, where my mother had announced that Mason had been blessed with a new home in a wonderful Charlotte neighborhood. Mason's neighborhood, I had since learned, had a median home price of $640,000. Mason's salary, last I had heard him brag about it, was $86,000 a year. Somebody was paying for Mason's life. It was not Mason. Below that were Tessa's wedding receipts, or what I had been able to reconstruct of them. Programs, save the dates, a copy of the menu I had taken from the welcome table, because I had wanted to know what kind of dinner cost what it had cost. The Lioncrest published their food and beverage minimum on a website that was not exactly hidden. I had done the math one night with a glass of wine and a calculator, and I had written the total at the bottom of the menu in red pen. The 118, 400 minimum. Tessa had told me Cody's parents were contributing. Cody's father was a regional manager at a tire distribution company. Cody's mother taught 3rd grade. They were not the people writing checks at Biltmore. The bottom layer of the box was the oldest. Photographs, mostly. Ruth on the back porch the summer before she died. Ruth at my nursing school graduation, the only person from my family who had come. In a wheelchair pushed by a hired aide because my mother had been at a church retreat she would not reschedule. Ruth's hand in mine in the hospital the week she died, her wedding ring loose on her finger. A photograph of Ruth's bedroom on the day I cleaned it out, the bed stripped, the closet half empty. Everything that had mattered to her about to be carried out in cardboard boxes by people who had not known her. And under those photographs was the envelope. Claire, only if you need it. The handwriting was Ruth's. The blue ink had faded a little at the edges. The envelope was a plain white business size, sealed with the lick and stick flap and a single piece of clear tape over the seal, because Ruth had always reinforced envelopes that way. People are nosy, Claire, she used to say. Tape is cheap. I held it for a long time before I opened it. I thought about the phone call in the hospice parking lot. You're not in it, Claire. Don't make this ugly. I thought about the mantle clock, The broken brass mantle clock from 2009 that my mother thought was an adequate inheritance for 23 chemo appointments. I thought about Mason's truck. I thought about Tessa's Monique Loulier dress. I thought about Ruth's hand on mine on the porch. When the time comes, you remember that I saw you. I slid the kitchen scissors under the flap and I opened it. There were 2 pages. Ruth's handwriting on both, neat and small the way she always wrote, the way you write when you grew up doing bookkeeping by hand. I read it twice before I let myself believe it. My Claire, if you are reading this, then something has happened that I was afraid would happen. Your mother has done something she should not have done, and you have been left with less than what you deserve. I am sorry. I should have told you all of this when I was alive, but I was afraid that if she knew, she would find a way to fight it, so I made a different plan. A quiet one. The farmhouse on Linville Road is mine. It has always been mine. I never put your mother's name on the deed, no matter what she has told people. The brokerage account your grandfather started for me in 1968 is also mine, and it has grown more than your mother knows. There is an attorney in Hendersonville named Harold Whitfield. His office is on Main Street, above the old hardware store. He has had my actual will in his vault since the spring of 2017. The will leaves the farmhouse, the 6 acres, and the brokerage account to you, Claire. Just you. Not your mother, not Mason, not Tessa. You. I did this because I watched. For 10 years, I watched. I saw who showed up. I saw who got used. I saw who was loved and who was needed, and I learned in this family those are not the same thing. Call Harold. Tell him you are my granddaughter and you have the letter. He will know what to do. I am sorry I could not tell you in person. I wanted to. I love you, sweetheart. I always saw you. Grandma Ruth at the bottom of the 2nd page, in pencil, in a hand that shook a little, she had written a phone number. I sat at my kitchen table at 11:30 at night with my dead grandmother's letter in my hand, and I did not cry. I felt something else, something I had not felt in a very long time. I felt awake. I felt like a person who had been holding her breath underwater for 8 years and had just broken the surface. I picked up my phone. I did not call the number. It was too late at night, and I was not going to make this call on wine and adrenaline. I set the phone down. I put the letter back in its envelope. I put the envelope on top of everything else in the shoebox, and I put the lid on, and I put the shoebox on the kitchen table where I would see it in the morning. Then I went to bed, and I slept for the first time in a week, and I dreamed of Ruth on the back porch with sweet tea going warm in her hand. In the morning, I made coffee. I put on a clean blouse. I sat down at the table with the shoebox in front of me and the letter on top of it. I picked up my phone, and I dialed the number written in pencil at the bottom of Ruth's 2nd page. A woman's voice answered on the 3rd ring. Whitfield Law Office. This is Joyce. I took a breath. My name is Claire Bennett, I said. I'm Ruth Bennett's granddaughter. I have a letter she left me. She said I should call Harold. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Just a beat, and then Joyce's voice changed, softened, dropped into something almost reverent. Miss Bennett, she said. Mr. Whitfield has been waiting 8 years for this call. Can you come in this morning? Hendersonville is a 30-minute drive south of Asheville, down I-26, past the apple orchards and the antique malls and the billboards for personal injury lawyers. I made the drive in 26 minutes that morning because I had not slept much and my foot was heavier than I realized. The shoebox was on the passenger seat. The letter was in my purse. I had put on real clothes, a navy blouse and dark jeans, and the small gold earrings Ruth had given me for my 16th birthday, because something inside me had decided this morning deserved gold earrings. Main Street in Hendersonville is the kind of street that has not changed much in 40 years. Brick storefronts, striped awnings, a bookstore that has been there since I was a child, a diner that still serves coffee in heavy white mugs. The old hardware store was exactly where Ruth had said it would be, halfway down the block. The painted sign above the door faded but readable. Henderson Hardware Co. Est. 1953. Beside the front door of the hardware store was a separate door, narrower, with a small brass plaque next to it. Whitfield Law Office, 2nd floor. I rang the bell. The door buzzed open. I climbed a narrow staircase that smelled like floor wax and old wood. And at the top there was a frosted glass door, with the same name painted on it in black letters with gold trim, the kind of signage nobody pays for anymore. I knocked, and a woman's voice called, "Come in, honey." The waiting room was small. 2 upholstered chairs, a coffee table with a stack of our state magazines, a window that looked down onto Main Street. Behind a wooden desk sat a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a cardigan the color of an apricot. She stood up when she saw me and came around the desk and took both my hands in hers, like she had known me my whole life. "You look just like her," Joyce said. "Around the eyes." "Oh, sweetheart, come on back. He's been up since 6. She led me down a short hallway. There was one office. The door was open, and sitting behind a desk that looked like it had been built when Eisenhower was president was a man in his mid-70s, white hair combed back, a navy bow tie, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He stood when I came in. He was tall, 6'2" at least, with the kind of leanness that men get when they have walked for an hour every morning of their adult lives. His eyes were a sharp pale blue. "Miss Bennett," he said, "Harold Whitfield. Please, sit down." His handshake was dry and firm. His office smelled like pipe tobacco that had not been smoked in years, the ghost of it baked into the wood paneling. There was a framed photograph on the wall behind him of a younger Harold, standing beside a woman in a wedding dress on the steps of a courthouse. There was a law degree from Wake Forest, dated 1974. There was a window that faced an alley, and on the windowsill was a coffee mug with a chip in the rim that I would later learn had belonged to his father, who had practiced law in this same office before him. I sat. I put the shoebox on his desk. I took the letter out of my purse and I laid it on top of the shoebox. I did not say anything, because I did not yet know what I was supposed to say. Harold did not pick up the letter right away. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he looked at me. His pale blue eyes did not have any of the practiced softness that lawyers use on bereaved clients. They had something else. They had recognition. "Your grandmother," he said, "was the most clear-headed woman I ever met in this profession." "Yes, sir. She came to me in March of 2017, drove herself, against her doctor's advice, sat in that chair you're sitting in now, told me she needed a will drawn up, and she needed it drawn up correctly, and she needed it kept somewhere her daughter could not find it." He paused. "She paid in cash. She did not want her bank statements to show the transaction." I felt my stomach drop. "She came back 3 more times that spring," Harold said, "each time alone. Each time on a day she had told your mother she was going to a hair appointment. We finalized the will on April 11, 2017. It was notarized in this office by Joyce, who you just met, and witnessed by my paralegal and a retired pastor I have used as a witness for 30 years. Both witnesses are still alive and have given sworn statements over the years confirming the signing. 11 days before that signing, on March 31st, your grandmother had a full competency evaluation done by a Dr. Eleanor Reyes, a geriatric psychiatrist in Asheville. The evaluation found her fully competent. We have that evaluation on file. Reyes is also still living and has confirmed it twice since." He paused. He let me sit with that for a moment. "Miss Bennett," he said, "your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. Can I see it?" He nodded slowly. He stood up and walked to a tall filing cabinet in the corner, the old kind with a key lock, and he unlocked the top drawer and pulled out a manila folder that was thicker than I expected. He brought it back to the desk and he sat down and he opened it, and he turned it around so I could read. The first page was Ruth's authentic last will and testament, dated April 11, 2017. Properly notarized, properly witnessed, properly filed. The language was formal, but the meaning was simple. To her only daughter, Diane Bennett, she left her personal jewelry, her piano, and a sum of $10,000 from her checking account. To her grandson Mason and her granddaughter Tessa, she left $5,000 each. To her granddaughter Claire Bennett, she left the farmhouse and 6 acres at 1422 Linville Road, Black Mountain, North Carolina, along with the brokerage account held at Morgan Stanley under account number ending in 4471. I looked at the brokerage account. The current balance, as of the most recent statement Harold had pulled, was $468,000. I did not say anything for a long time. Harold did not push me. He folded his hands on the desk and waited. "My mother told everyone the house went to her." I finally said, "I know. She has been telling people that for 8 years. I know. There is a mortgage on it. $87,000. A home equity line of credit. November of 2019. Harold's face did something then. Just a small tightening around the mouth. The look of a man who has been waiting a long time to be asked exactly this question. "Miss Bennett," he said, "your mother did not legally own that house in November of 2019. The deed was never transferred to her. Your grandmother kept the deed in her own name until the day she died, and on the day she died, By the terms of the will in front of you, the deed transferred to you. Not to your mother. To you. The fact that your mother allowed a lender to place a lion on that property is, depending on how the application was filled out, either bank fraud, elder financial abuse, or both. She forged something. She had to have. A lender would have required a copy of the deed. Either the lender was deceived as to the ownership, or your mother represented herself as the owner on documents she had no right to sign. Either way, the loan is voidable, and the lender will have a problem with your mother, not with you. You did not sign anything. You are the legal owner of an unencumbered property. I sat with that for a minute. The room was very quiet. Joyce had closed the door when she'd shown me in, and the only sound was the faint hum of the radiator and the occasional car passing on Main Street below. What about the brokerage account? Untouched. Your grandmother set it up so that the account would freeze on her death and not release until presented with the original will. Your mother has been trying to access it for 8 years. Morgan Stanley has been refusing her, politely, every time. They have my number on file. They have been very patient. She knows the account exists. She knows it exists. She does not know where the will is. She has assumed, I believe, that the account would eventually default to her through intestate succession if she simply waited long enough. That is not how it works, but I imagine no one has corrected her, because no one has had standing to. I leaned back in the chair. I put my hands flat on my thighs because my hands had started to shake a little, and I did not want Harold to see them shake. I was not upset. I was something else. I was the way you feel when you have spent your whole life being told you are imagining things, and then a stranger shows you a folder that proves you weren't. What do I do? Harold looked at me for a long moment. That, he said, is entirely your decision, but I would like to walk you through your options. May I, please? He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and uncapped a fountain pen, not a ballpoint, a real fountain pen with green ink. He wrote my name at the top of the page in a careful old-fashioned hand. Option 1, he said. We'll go to your mother today. I drive over there myself with a certified copy of the will and the deed, and we end this in a kitchen. Your mother gets a phone call from her own lawyer within the hour. Mason gets a phone call. Tessa gets a phone call. The family lawyer they hired drafts a new will that they have presumably already shown to the three of them. That new will is meaningless, because your mother could not legally bequeath what she does not own, but it tells us what they intended to do. We void the HLOs. We file for recovery of the borrowed funds. Your mother and father are looking at possible criminal exposure. Your brother and sister are simply embarrassed. Option 2. He almost smiled. He did not, but it was close. Option 2 is slower and quieter, and in my experience, more effective when the goal is not only legal vindication but also moral clarity. Your mother has, by your account, scheduled a formal will reading. When? 3 weeks from Friday. At her lawyer's office in Asheville. The whole family is invited. Then we let her have her will reading? Sir? We let her sit at the head of the table. We let her lawyer read her version of the document aloud. We let your brother believe he is inheriting a farmhouse, and your sister believes she is inheriting an account she has already spent in her head. And then, Miss Bennett, at the appropriate moment, I knock on the door. I looked at him. You would do that? I would consider it, Harold said. Professional honor. Your grandmother sat in that chair you're in and she told me, and I quote Harold, if my daughter does what I think she is going to do, I want her to do it in front of an audience. I have been carrying that sentence around for 8 years. I started to laugh, quietly, into my hand because I did not know what else to do. There is a third option, Harold said. I would be a poor lawyer if I did not name it. You could choose not to act at all. You could let your family carry on believing what they believe, and walk away, and let the property sit in legal limbo, and let the account remain frozen. Some people, after years of mistreatment, find that the cleanest revenge is absence. That is a legitimate choice. I would never push a client one way or the other. I thought about that. For about 4 seconds. I want option 2. Harold nodded once. He capped the fountain pen. Then for the next 3 weeks, he said, you will go to Sunday dinner. You will smile. You will ask your brother about his truck. You will compliment your sister's earrings. You will help your mother with the dishes. You will not say one word about this letter or this office or this conversation. You will not tell a friend. You will not write it in a journal that someone could find. You will carry it alone for 21 days. Can you do that? I thought about 23 Mondays of chemo. I thought about 3 years of dialysis Thursdays. I thought about 8 years of a shoebox. Mr. Whitfield, I said, I have been carrying things alone my entire life. 3 weeks is nothing. He stood up, he shook my hand. He walked me to the door. Joyce was waiting with a manila envelope, a copy of the will inside it, for me to keep in my own home, in a safe place she suggested I rent at a bank where my mother did not bank. At the top of the stairs I turned around. Mr. Whitfield. Yes, Miss Bennett. Did my grandmother say anything else about me when she was here? He looked at me for a long moment with those sharp pale blue eyes. She said you were the only one in that house who ever asked her how she was sleeping. I did not cry on the stairs. I did not cry in the car. I drove the 26 minutes back to Asheville with the manila envelope on the passenger seat and Ruth's letter beside it. And I did not cry until I pulled into my apartment parking lot and put the car in park. And then I cried for 10 minutes straight, with both hands on the steering wheel, because for the first time in my adult life I had been told, by someone who had no reason to lie, that I had been seen. 3 weeks. I could do 3 weeks. Sunday dinner was in 4 days. The first Sunday was the hardest. I want to tell you that, because I think people imagine revenge as a kind of high, a clean rush of righteousness that carries you through. It is not. Revenge, the real kind, the patient kind, the kind that ends in a room going silent, feels mostly like nausea. It feels like sitting in your car in your parents' driveway, with a casserole on the passenger seat, and forcing yourself to breathe through your nose. I had made a sweet potato casserole. My mother loved sweet potato casserole, the kind with the brown sugar topping, and I had spent an hour the night before cubing the potatoes and toasting the pecans, and arranging everything in the Pyrex dish Ruth had given me when I moved into my first apartment. I brought it into the house at 5:15 on a cold Sunday in late October, and my mother kissed me on the cheek and said, "Oh, Claire, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," I said, and I smiled, and I meant the smile, because Harold had told me that the most important thing I could do for the next 3 weeks was act exactly the way I had always acted, and the way I had always acted was to bring a casserole and smile. Mason was already there. He was standing in the kitchen with a beer in his hand, leaning against the counter the way he leaned against everything, like rooms were built specifically to display him. His wife Brittany was in the living room with their 2 kids, scrolling on her phone while the kids watched cartoons on my father's iPad. Tessa came in 15 minutes later with Cody and a bottle of wine she had clearly bought at Trader Joe's, and that she introduced as this little pint we discovered in Charleston. I set the casserole on the counter. I hugged my brother. I hugged my sister. I asked Brittany about the kids' school. I asked Cody about his golf game. I asked Mason about the truck. Still running great, Mason said. Got the bed liner put in last month. That's wonderful. He looked at me a beat too long. I think some part of him expected me to be a different kind of person on this Sunday. The Sunday after my mother had told me I had been written out of the will. He expected me to be sour, maybe, or tearful, or pointed. He did not expect me to ask about the bed liner. I asked about the bed liner. We sat down to dinner at 6. My mother said grace. My father carved the chicken with hands that shook only a little. Mason talked about a listing he had just closed in Myers Park. Tessa talked about a brand deal she was negotiating with a candle company. Brittany talked about preschool tuition. Cody chewed. And then, somewhere around the green beans, Mason said the thing I had been waiting for him to say. So Mom, the farmhouse. We were thinking, when everything is finalized, we'd start with the kitchen. Brittany has some ideas. Oh, definitely the kitchen, Brittany said, lighting up. I was thinking quartz countertops. Maybe one of those farmhouse sinks. The cabinets are just so dated. I cut a piece of chicken. I put it in my mouth. I chewed it 20 times, the way nurses learn to do when they need to keep their faces still. Grandma's cabinets, I said mildly. She picked those out. Well, that was 40 years ago, Claire. Brittany laughed. I don't think Grandma Ruth would mind a refresh. I'm sure she wouldn't. My mother smiled at me, the kind of smile she gave me when I was being a good sport. Claire is so reasonable. She has always been so reasonable. That's me, I said. Reasonable Claire. Tessa, who had been quiet, looked up from her phone, and we were thinking, with the brokerage account Cody and I want to do the down payment on a bigger place. Something with a yard. The condo is just so small now that we're thinking about kids. Cody had not, to my knowledge, expressed any interest in having children. Cody was 29 years old and had recently bought a Peloton. That sounds like a beautiful plan, Tess, I said. Thanks, Claire, I knew you'd be supportive. I caught my father watching me from the other end of the table. Just for a second, his eyes moved up and then quickly back to his plate. He had not said a single word in 20 minutes. He had not asked me about my week. He had not asked me about the patient I had lost on Tuesday, the 78-year-old man whose wife had brought him a thermos of coffee every morning for 51 years and who had sat with me afterward and held my hand and said thank you for being kind to my husband. My father did not know any of that, because my father had not asked. I helped my mother with the dishes. I dried while she washed. She talked about the church Christmas bazaar, which she was chairing again this year. She talked about a woman from her Bible study who had had a stroke. She did not, at any point, mention the will, or Mason's renovation plans, or Tessa's down payment, or the fact that she had told me in a hospice parking lot 4 weeks ago that I was getting a broken clock. I dried every dish. I put them away in the cabinets Brittany wanted to tear out. I kissed my mother on the cheek. I drove home. In my apartment, I sat on the edge of my bed in my coat for 10 minutes before I took it off. I did not cry. I did not call Harold. I did not write anything down. I did exactly what Harold had told me to do, which was nothing. I let the day sit in me like a stone, and I went to sleep. And I went to work on Monday and held the hand of a woman named Marion Pell while she stopped breathing. And on Tuesday I changed the dressing on a man named Frank, who had a tumor the size of a grapefruit pressing on his spine. And on Wednesday I picked up a triple shift because one of our nurses had the flu, and I did not let myself think about Sunday at all. The second Sunday was easier. The third Sunday was almost easy. By the second Sunday, Mason had moved from the kitchen renovation into the question of whether to keep the pecan tree. It's a mess every fall, Mom. Honestly, the squirrels, the branches on the roof. Your grandmother planted that tree, my mother said, mildly, and I almost choked on my water. Because my mother had complained about the pecan tree for 20 years. My mother had wanted that tree cut down since I was in middle school. But suddenly, in the presence of a son who wanted to take a chainsaw to it, my mother had become its protector. Maybe just trim it, Brittany said, conciliatory. Maybe, Mason said. I watched my mother's face. There was something underneath the polite chairperson smile, something tight and watchful, and I realized, for the first time, that my mother did not entirely trust Mason either. She was going to sign the farmhouse over to him because Mason was her son and Mason carried the family name and Mason had children. But she was watching him eye the pecan tree the way you watch a man eye a woman who is not his wife. My mother loved her son. My mother also knew her son. I filed that away. By the third Sunday, the conversation had shifted to logistics. The will reading was Friday. My mother had called the lawyer and confirmed. The lawyer, a man named Gerald Boone, whom my mother had used for 15 years for various small matters, would meet everyone at his office on Charlotte Street at 10 in the morning. There would be coffee. There would be the reading itself, which Gerald estimated would take about 30 minutes. There would be the signing of various acknowledgments. There would be, my mother said, a small lunch at her house afterward, to celebrate the family being together. She said the word celebrate and nobody laughed. Tessa nodded earnestly. Mason poured himself another beer. My father stared at his plate. I'll be there, I said. Of course you will, dear. 10 o'clock Friday. 10 o'clock Friday. I asked my mother about the recipe for the green bean casserole she was planning for the lunch afterward. She gave it to me in detail, including the brand of fried onions she preferred. I wrote it down on a napkin like a daughter who cared. Mason watched me write. He did not understand what he was watching. He thought he was watching defeat. He was actually watching a woman taking notes on what a kitchen looked like the last time it belonged to her grandmother. I drove home from that third Sunday at 9:15 at night. The roads were dark. I took the long way, past the farmhouse on Linville Road, because I wanted to see it from the outside. I parked across the street, with my lights off, and I looked at it for maybe 2 minutes. The porch light was on. Somebody had left a pumpkin on the front steps that had started to collapse in on itself. The pecan tree stood black against the sky. I thought about Ruth on the back porch. When the time comes, you remember I saw you. I drove home. On Thursday night, the night before the reading, Harold called me at 7:30. He never called me. He had been very clear, for 3 weeks, that we should not communicate by phone unless something changed. So when his name came up on my screen, my stomach dropped. Miss Bennett, he said. Tomorrow morning, I will be parked on Charlotte Street, 2 blocks east of Gerald Boone's office, in a dark green Volvo station wagon. I will arrive at 9:45. You will walk in alone at 10. You will sit. You will say nothing about me. You will let Mr. Boone read his document in full. You will not interrupt. You will not react. Do you understand? Yes. When Mr. Boone concludes the reading and asks for acknowledgments, you will excuse yourself to the restroom. You will leave your phone on the table. You will walk down the hall, and you will let me know by a single text to Joyce, the word now, that the reading is complete and the family is present. Then you will walk back into that room. By the time you sit down, I will be 3 minutes behind you. Yes, sir. Miss Bennett. Yes. Wear something your grandmother would have liked. I hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. Then I went into my closet and I pulled out the navy dress, the one Ruth had once said brought out my eyes, the one I had worn to her funeral and not worn since. I steamed the wrinkles out. I laid it flat on the chair by my bed. I set my alarm for 6. I went to sleep. I did not dream about anything I can remember. In the morning, at 7:30, I got up. I drank coffee. I ate half a piece of toast because my stomach would not hold more. I showered. I put on the navy dress. I put on Ruth's gold earrings. I brushed my hair back into a low knot the way Ruth used to wear hers. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror for a long moment, and I did not see a tired hospice nurse, and I did not see a useful daughter, and I did not see a woman who had been written out of a will. I saw my grandmother's eyes looking back at me. I picked up my purse. I picked up my keys. I locked my apartment door behind me. I drove to Charlotte Street in Asheville on a clear, cold Friday morning in November. And at 9:52, I parked 2 blocks west of Gerald Boone's office, on the opposite side of the street from a dark green Volvo station wagon I did not look at. I walked. The sidewalk was uneven. The bare branches of the trees moved a little in the wind. I passed a coffee shop where a woman in a red coat was laughing at something her friend had said. And I thought, briefly, what an ordinary morning this is for everyone in the world except for me. I reached the door. Gerald Boone, attorney at law, painted on the glass. I put my hand on the handle. I took one breath. I pulled the door open and I walked inside. Gerald Boone's office was on the second floor of a renovated brick building on Charlotte Street, the kind of building that had been a dry goods store in 1910 and a dentist's office in 1960, and was now home to 3 lawyers and a tax preparer. The waiting room was beige. The carpet was beige. There was a framed print of a sailboat on one wall and a fake ficus tree in the corner. My mother was sitting on the beige couch in a black wool dress and her good pearls, and when she saw me, she stood up and put both hands on my shoulders and said, "Oh, Claire, I'm so glad you came." I was worried. "Why would you worry, Mom? You've been so quiet. I thought maybe you were upset." "I'm fine, Mom. You look tired. I worked late last night." She kissed the air near my cheek and stepped back. Mason was standing by the window, scrolling his phone. He wore a navy suit I had not seen before. Brittany was beside him in a cream blouse and pearls of her own, holding a leather tote that probably cost more than my rent. Tessa was on the love seat in a black sheath dress, her makeup heavier than usual, the way women do their makeup when they are afraid the day might involve crying for cameras that aren't actually there. Cody was beside her, on his phone, looking bored. My father sat alone in a wingback chair near the door. He had on his good gray suit, the one he had worn to Ruth's funeral. He looked at me when I came in. He looked at me for maybe a second and a half. Then he looked at the carpet. A woman in a cardigan came through a side door and said, "Mr. Boone is ready for you all. Please follow me." We followed her down a short hallway into a conference room. The room had a long wooden table, 8 upholstered chairs, a sideboard with a coffee carafe and a stack of porcelain cups, and a window that overlooked the side alley. Gerald Boone was standing at the head of the table with a leather folio open in front of him. He was in his early 60s, gray at the temples, wearing a charcoal suit and a tie my mother had probably picked out, because Gerald Boone had been my mother's lawyer for 15 years and my mother dressed her men. He smiled at us with practiced warmth. He shook my mother's hand first, my father's second, Mason's third. He shook mine last, and when he did, his eyes did not quite meet mine, he knew. Of course he knew. Or he suspected. A lawyer drafting a will that excludes one of 3 children always suspects. "Please, sit," he said. "Wherever you like." My mother sat at one end of the table, beside Gerald. Mason and Brittany took the seats to her left. Tessa and Cody took the seats to her right. My father sat at the far end, alone, the way he had sat at the head of our own kitchen table for 30 years, without ever actually leading anything. I sat on the long side of the table, midway down, facing the window. I put my purse on the empty chair next to me. I folded my hands in my lap. I waited. Gerald cleared his throat. "Thank you all for being here this morning," he said. "We are gathered to read the last will and testament of Mrs. Diane Bennett, signed and notarized in this office on the 18th of September, 2025, and to discuss the disposition of the family estate. I'll begin with a brief preamble. Mrs. Bennett, will you confirm for the record that this is your authentic and current will?" "I do," my mother said, like a wedding vow. "And that you are of sound mind and not acting under duress." "I am of sound mind. I am not acting under duress." "Thank you. I'll proceed." He opened the folio. He took out 3 stapled documents. He took a pair of reading glasses out of his breast pocket and slid them onto his nose. He read. He read for 22 minutes. I want you to understand exactly what 22 minutes feels like in a beige conference room while a lawyer reads aloud the document that says you do not matter to your own parents. He read the standard preamble, the part about being of sound mind, the part about revoking all prior wills. He read the disposition of personal effects. My mother's jewelry to Tessa, her grandmother's china to Brittany, my father's tools and golf clubs to Mason, the piano to Tessa, the silver tea service Ruth had used for 40 Easter Sundays to Tessa. He read the disposition of liquid assets. Mason was to receive 60% of my parents' checking and savings, in recognition of his role as the eldest son and the family man. Tessa was to receive 40%, in recognition of her recent marriage and the start of her own household. I was not mentioned in the liquid assets section. He read the disposition of real property. To my eldest son, Mason Walter Bennett, I leave the family residence at 1422 Linville Road, Black Mountain, North Carolina, together with the 6 acres of land on which it stands, in recognition of his commitment to preserving the Bennett family legacy. Mason did not smile. Mason was too smart to smile. But Brittany's hand reached out under the table and squeezed his knee. I saw it because I was watching Mason's face the way a hospice notches a patient's chest rise and fall. Gerald turned the page. To my daughter, Tessa Bennett Hale, I leave the contents of the Morgan Stanley brokerage account ending in 4471, currently valued at approximately $468,000, in recognition of her recent marriage and the establishment of her own household. Tessa made a small sound, not a cry, a kind of inhale, like a woman receiving a compliment she had been fishing for. She squeezed Cody's hand. Cody finally looked up from his phone. Gerald turned the page again. To my daughter, Claire Marie Bennett, I leave the session's brass mantle clock that belonged to her grandmother, Ruth Bennett, along with the porcelain figurine collection, currently displayed on the front room mantle, in recognition of her care for the family during difficult times. He paused. He looked up. He looked at me over his reading glasses. I did not move. I did not blink. I held his eyes for a beat, and then I nodded once, the way you nod at a waiter who has refilled your water. "Thank you, Mr. Boone." "You're welcome, Miss Bennett." My mother was watching me. Her face was perfectly composed, but her eyes were hungry. She wanted something. She wanted a tear, a tremor, a flash of hurt that would confirm for her that she had successfully made me small in front of the family. I gave her my hospice face, the face I have used at 10,000 bedsides, calmed, unreadable. Mason was watching me too. He was confused. He had expected me to argue. He had expected me to make a scene. He had been prepared, I think, with a speech about how I had always been difficult, and he was holding the speech behind his teeth and waiting for the opening, and the opening was not coming. Tessa was looking at her phone. "If there are no immediate questions," Gerald said, "I will move on to the acknowledgement forms. Each of you will be asked to sign." "Excuse me?" I said. The room went quiet. "Could I use the restroom before we sign? It's down the hall." Gerald blinked. "Of course." "Yes. Out the door, to the right." "Thank you." I stood up. I left my purse on the chair. I walked out of the conference room into the beige hallway and I closed the door behind me. The restroom was 4 steps to the right. I went inside. I locked the door. I leaned against the sink for exactly 5 seconds with both hands braced on the porcelain. I did not look at myself in the mirror. I took my phone out of the small inside pocket of my dress, the kind of pocket only women who buy dresses for moments like this know to look for, and I typed one word and sent it to Joyce. Now I put the phone back in the pocket. I flushed the toilet, because a woman who goes to the restroom and does not flush the toilet draws attention. I ran the water. I washed my hands. I dried them on a paper towel, and I dropped the paper towel in the bin, and I opened the door, and I walked back down the hall, and I let myself back into the conference room, and I sat down in my chair, and I picked up the pen Gerald had placed at my spot. "My apologies," I said. "Not at all," Gerald said. He began to explain the acknowledgement forms. He was saying something about how the form did not constitute consent, only confirmation of having heard the reading, when there was a knock at the conference room door. 3 knocks, steady, unhurried. Gerald paused. He frowned. "I'm sorry, we asked not to be interrupted." "Excuse me?" He stood and walked to the door and opened it. Harold Whitfield was standing in the doorway. He was wearing a charcoal suit and a navy bow tie. He was holding a leather portfolio in one hand and a sealed manila envelope in the other. Behind him stood Joyce in her apricot cardigan, carrying a second portfolio. Beside Joyce stood a third person, a woman I had not met, wearing a county clerk's badge clipped to her blazer and holding a thin folder of certified documents. Harold's pale blue eyes moved past Gerald and into the room. They found my mother first. They held on her face for 2 full seconds. Then they moved to me. He gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. "Mr. Boone," Harold said. "Harold Whitfield, attorney at law, Hendersonville. I apologize for the interruption. I am here on behalf of the estate of the late Mrs. Ruth Bennett, the actual record owner of the property and accounts that have just been discussed in this room. I have with me a certified copy of Mrs. Bennett's authentic last will and testament, properly notarized and filed with Henderson County in April of 2017, along with a county clerk's certification, a competency evaluation from the same period, and the original deed to the property at 1422 Linville Road, Black Mountain. I am also accompanied by Ms. Wellen from the Henderson County Clerk's office, who can confirm the authenticity of the filed documents on the spot if there are any questions." The room did not just go quiet. The room stopped existing. I could hear the radiator. I could hear a car passing on Charlotte Street 2 stories below. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, slow and steady, the way it gets at a bedside when the breathing changes. My mother's hand was on the table, fingers spread, like she was trying to keep herself upright through her palm. Her face had gone the color of paper. Her mouth had opened, just slightly, and then closed. Mason stood up. He stood up too fast and his chair scraped backward and tipped on its rear legs before righting itself. "Who the hell are you?" "I just told you, sir. My name is Harold Whitfield. I am the attorney for the estate of your grandmother. Grandma's estate was settled 8 years ago." "No, sir, it was not," my mother said. "I am aware, Mr. Bennett, of what your mother has said." Gerald Boone had taken 2 steps back from the doorway. His face had gone very still. He looked at Harold. He looked at the manila envelope. He looked at the county clerk standing in his hallway with a badge clipped to her blazer. He turned to my mother. "Deanne," he said quietly. "Deanne, is there something I need to know?" My mother did not answer him. She was looking at me. She was looking at me like she had never seen me before. Harold stepped fully into the room. Joyce followed. The county clerk followed. They did not sit. They stood along the wall opposite the window, the 3 of them, like witnesses at a baptism. Harold walked the length of the table to where I was sitting, and he set the manila envelope down in front of me with the gentleness of a man placing a flower on a grave. "Miss Bennett?" he said. "With your permission." "Yes," I said. He turned to Gerald. He turned to my mother. He turned to the entire side of the table that had spent 22 minutes congratulating itself. "Mr. Boone," he said, "I would like, with the court clerk present as a witness, to read into this discussion the authentic last will and testament of Ruth Eleanor Bennett, dated April 11th, 2017. Gerald looked at my mother one more time. My mother did not look at him. Gerald sat down slowly in his chair at the head of the table. He folded his hands. He nodded. "Please," he said. "Proceed." Harold opened the portfolio. Mason was still standing. Brittany reached up and tugged at his sleeve and he sat down, hard, the way a man sits when his legs have stopped agreeing with him. Tessa had put her phone face down on the table. Cody was staring at the wall. My father had not moved at all. He was looking at me, finally, fully, with his whole face, and his eyes were wet, and I understood in that moment that my father had known. He had known for 8 years. He had known and he had let it happen. Harold cleared his throat. "I, Ruth Eleanor Bennett of Black Mountain, North Carolina, being of sound and disposing mind and memory, and not acting under duress, menace, fraud, or undue influence of any person whomsoever, do hereby make, publish, and declare this to be my last will and testament, hereby revoking any and all wills and codicils heretofore made by me." He paused. He looked up. He looked at my mother for one long second, and then he went on. He read for 9 minutes. He read every clause. He read the bequest of jewelry to Diane Bennett. He read the bequest of $5,000 each to Mason and Tessa. He read, when he came to it, in a voice that did not change pitch or pace but somehow filled the entire room, the bequest of the farmhouse at 1422 Linville Road, all 6 acres, and the Morgan Stanley brokerage account ending in 4471, to Claire Marie Bennett, granddaughter, with the explanatory clause Ruth had insisted on including. Because she showed up. That was the phrase. Because she showed up. Ruth had made him include it. When Harold finished reading, he set the document down on the table. He took the deed out of the portfolio and laid it next to the will. He took the competency evaluation and laid it next to the deed. The county clerk stepped forward and laid the certified filing receipt next to that. 4 pieces of paper. 8 years of paper. Everything Ruth had quietly built in that little office above the hardware store. All laid out on Gerald Boone's beige conference table, like a hand of cards no one in the room could match. My mother whispered, "That can't be right." Harold turned to her. He did not raise his voice. He did not lean forward. He spoke the way a doctor speaks when he is telling a family the time of death. "Mrs. Bennett, your mother's authentic will has been filed with Henderson County since April of 2017. The deed to the farmhouse has been in your mother's name continuously since 1962 and transferred upon her death to your daughter Claire. The brokerage account has been held in trust at Morgan Stanley under instructions to release only upon presentation of this will, which I have brought today. The home equity loan you obtained against this property in November of 2019 was secured against an asset you did not legally own. That is a matter we will need to address separately, with your own counsel present." The room did not move. I heard, very clearly, the sound of Mason's truck keys being set down on the table. He had been holding them. He set them down. I do not think he knew he had done it. My mother's hand came up to her throat. I need to call my lawyer." "Mr. Boone is your lawyer, Mrs. Bennett. He is sitting beside you." Gerald did not look at her. Gerald was looking at the certified filing receipt on the table in front of him, and his face had the specific expression of a man who has just realized he is going to need to call his malpractice carrier. "I need a different lawyer," my mother said. "That would be advisable." I stood up, slowly. I did not push my chair back hard. I did not slam my hands on the table. I picked up my purse. I picked up the manila envelope Harold had set in front of me. I walked the length of the table, past my mother, past my brother, past my sister, past my father, and I stopped at the door. I turned. I did not say I told you so. I did not say you should have loved me. I did not say anything Ruth would not have said. I said, "I'll be in touch through Mr. Whitfield." Then I opened the door, and I walked out, and behind me I heard the room finally begin to make sound again. The broken human sound of a family realizing all at once that the quiet daughter had been the one paying attention. I did not look back. Harold caught up to me on the sidewalk 20 seconds later. He did not say anything. He just walked beside me, in the cold November sun, down Charlotte Street toward where my Corolla was parked, and at the corner I stopped and I put both hands on the cold metal of a parking meter, and I let myself, finally, for the first time in 3 weeks, breathe. The first phone call came at 11:47 that same morning, while I was still sitting in Harold's office above the hardware store with my hands wrapped around a coffee mug Joyce had pressed into them. My phone buzzed. The screen said Mason. I did not answer. Harold had told me not to. Harold had told me, very specifically, that for the next several days, every communication from my family was to be routed through him. "They will try every register," he said. "Anger first, then negotiation, then sentiment. Do not engage with any of them." Mason called 4 times in the next hour. Then Brittany called twice. Then Tessa called once and texted 17 times. The text escalating from Claire, "We need to talk to, I cannot believe you would do this," to our family, to Cody, "says we should sue you too." Finally, at 1:14 p.m., "Please, just call me. I'm scared." Tessa had spent the brokerage account in her head. I knew that. Tessa had told her husband, her friends, and probably a candle company that she had nearly $500,000 coming. Tessa was now sitting in her condo realizing she did not. I did not call her back. My mother did not call at all. My mother's silence, I came to understand over the following weeks, was the loudest sound in the family. My father called once, at 40:30 that afternoon, when I was driving home from Hendersonville with the manila envelope on the passenger seat. The screen said Dad. I let it go to voicemail. I listened to the voicemail in my apartment at 6, sitting on the edge of my bed in the navy dress I had not yet taken off. Claire, it's your father. I want you to know I'm sorry. I should have said something a long time ago. I didn't. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to hear me say it. That was the whole voicemail. 21 seconds. I saved it. I have saved it. I have not deleted it, and I have not called him back. Harold called me Saturday morning. He had spent Friday afternoon, after he left the conference room, drafting and filing the first round of paperwork. He walked me through what was happening, in plain language, with the patience of a man who had done this kind of thing for 50 years. The deed to the farmhouse was being formally recorded in my name through the Henderson County Registrar, with a cover letter explaining that the property had transferred at Ruth's death in 2017, and the 8-year delay was due to the will being held in a separate firm. This was clerical, not litigation. The haylock was the harder piece. The lender, a regional bank Ruth had never done business with, had been notified Friday afternoon that the property securing their loan had not been legally owned by the borrowers at the time of the loan origination. The lender's general counsel had called Harold back within 90 minutes. Banks do not like to learn they have made $87,000 loans on collateral the borrower did not own. The bank was, Harold told me, highly motivated to recover from your parents directly and to release any claim against the property. My parents were going to be on the hook for the full $87,000 plus 6 years of interest. The bank was already in conversations with their fraud department about whether to refer the matter to law enforcement. Harold did not push for criminal charges. I did not push either. We let the bank make its own decision. My parents had 8 weeks to repay or face civil suit, and possibly more. The brokerage account was simpler. Morgan Stanley released the funds to me within 10 business days of receiving certified copies of the will and the death certificate. $468,000, plus another $19,000 in dividends Ruth had never touched, transferred into a new account in my name on a Tuesday afternoon in late November. I sat in my Corolla in the bank parking lot and I looked at the balance on my phone for a long time. I had never, in my entire life, seen that much money in a place that belonged to me. I did not feel rich. I felt witnessed. The smaller consequences spread slowly, the way news spreads in a southern town, by way of church ladies and neighbors, and the woman who does everyone's hair at the salon on Broadway. My mother had been chair of the missions committee at First Methodist for 11 years. She had also, I learned later, told several of her closest church friends a sanitized version of the will dispute in the days after the reading, casting herself as a mother who had been blindsided by an ungrateful daughter and a manipulative grandmother. What she did not know was that one of those church friends had a sister-in-law who worked as a paralegal in Hendersonville. The story made its way back through that pipeline within a week, and the version that came back was not the version my mother had told. The deacon's wife called my mother on a Monday afternoon and asked her, gently, if she would consider stepping down from the missions committee while some family matters were being resolved. My mother stepped down. She also stopped attending Wednesday Bible study. She started attending the early service on Sunday mornings, the 8 o'clock one with the smaller crowd, where she could sit in the back and leave before the coffee hour. Mason filed for an emergency loan against his Charlotte house in December. The truck was sold by January. Brittany's posts about the kitchen renovation disappeared from her Instagram, replaced by carefully filtered photos of her children and quotes about seasons of growth. Mason called me twice more, in February and again in March, leaving voicemails that started conciliatory and ended angry. Claire, we're family. Family takes care of each other. You don't need a farmhouse. You live alone. I saved those voicemails. 2. I did not call back. Tessa's marriage ended in March. I want to be careful about how I describe this, because I do not believe a marriage ends because of one missing inheritance. A marriage ends because it was already ending. The inheritance was the floor that Cody had been standing on, the floor he did not realize he was standing on, and when the floor disappeared he discovered that he had never actually been in love with my sister, only with the version of her that came with money. Cody moved out on March 14th. Tessa moved back in with our parents on March 21st. The Monique Louillier dresses, As far as I know, still hanging in a closet on Linville Road. She called me on April 2nd. I was on a hospice shift. I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail was 47 seconds long and Tessa cried through most of it. Claire, please. I know I haven't been a good sister. I know I haven't. But I need help. Mom won't talk to me about money and Dad just shuts down and I don't know what to do. Cody took the car. Please, Claire, I'm not asking for anything from the will. I just need a sister. I listened to that voicemail 3 times in the parking lot after my shift. Then I called Harold. She wants to talk. What do you want? Miss Bennett. I don't know. Then you don't call her back yet. You call her back when you know. I did not call her back. Not for a long time. By June, my parents had repaid the bank with money they raised by selling their second car, cashing out a small retirement account, and, I learned later, borrowing $15,000 from my father's brother in Tennessee. The fraud referral did not move forward because the bank had been made whole and because my father had walked into the branch in early February and signed an affidavit accepting personal responsibility for the loan application. He did not blame my mother. He did not try to get her name off the paperwork. He simply signed and said, I am the one responsible. Harold told me about that affidavit 2 weeks after the fact. The way you tell someone about a small kindness from a person who has hurt them. I sat with it for a long time. I am still sitting with it. The farmhouse stayed empty through the winter and into the spring. I had Harold contact my parents formally in January and inform them that they were welcome to remain in the house through the end of June, rent-free, while they made other arrangements. This was, my mother told a church friend, who eventually told me, the cruelest thing Claire has ever done, because it gave her 6 months to look at every wall and every window and understand that the house had never been hers. They moved out on June 22nd. They moved into a 2-bedroom rental on the other side of Black Mountain. My mother did not invite me to the new house. I did not ask to come. In July, I drove out to the farmhouse alone for the first time as its legal owner. I parked in the driveway. I sat in my car for a minute with the key in my hand. I walked up the porch steps. I unlocked the front door. I stood in the front hallway, where Ruth had hung the photograph of my grandfather in his army uniform, where my mother had later replaced it with a framed cross stitch. The cross stitch was gone. The hook was still in the wall. The house smelled like an empty house, like dust and closed windows and the faint memory of beeswax. I walked through every room. The kitchen Brittany had wanted to gut. The front room with the bay window where Ruth had sat in her wheelchair. The bedroom that had been Ruth's. The back porch where the pecan tree still stood, full of green leaves, dropping nothing yet. I did not move in. I am not ready to live in that house, and I may never be. But I did something else. In August, through Harold and through a property manager he recommended, I rented the farmhouse to a young couple I had met through the hospice. Her name is Maria. She is 29. Her husband Daniel is a high school history teacher. They have a 2-year-old daughter named June and a baby on the way. Maria's mother was one of my patients in the spring. She died on a Thursday in April, and Maria sat with her, and I sat with both of them. And afterward Maria and I stayed in touch the way you stay in touch with the families of patients you cared about. When I told Maria about the farmhouse and asked her if she and Daniel might want to rent it at $600 under the market rate, she cried. She tried to refuse. I told her Ruth would have liked the idea of a young mother in that house. I told her Ruth had been the kind of woman who would have walked groceries over from her car if she had seen Maria struggling. They moved in on September 1st. Their daughter June has a swing in the pecan tree now. I drove past the house in late September, just once, and I saw a Halloween pumpkin on the front porch that had not yet started to collapse. The brokerage account sat untouched for most of that first year. I did not buy a car. I did not buy a house. I did not take a vacation. I paid off my student loans, which had been the quiet weight on my back since I was 23, and after I paid them I did not feel triumph. I felt strange. I felt the way you feel when you take off a backpack you have been wearing so long you stopped noticing the straps. I did one other thing with Ruth's money. I made a single transfer, in March of the following year, to a small foundation Harold helped me set up. The foundation provides emergency grants to family caregivers, the kind of grants that pay a copay or a parking fee or a tank of gas for somebody driving their mother to chemo every Monday. The foundation is in Ruth's name. The Ruth Bennett Caregiver Fund. The first 3 grants went out in May. One of them went to a woman in Hickory who had been making the drive to Charlotte twice a week for her father's dialysis. She wrote me a thank you card. I keep it in the same drawer where my father's unopened birthday card sits. Harold and I had lunch in April at a small place on Main Street in Hendersonville, 2 doors down from his office. He ordered the chicken salad. He told me over coffee that in 51 years of practicing law, he had never had a client whose patience he respected more. It wasn't patience, Mr. Whitfield. What was it then? I thought about it for a minute. It was knowing she saw me. He nodded once, slowly. He did not say anything else. By the time the first anniversary of the reading arrived, in late November, the family had reorganized itself around an absence. My mother and I had not spoken since the morning Harold walked into the conference room. My father had sent 3 more cards, none of them opened. Mason had stopped calling sometime in May, after a final voicemail in which he told me I was a cold woman and that Grandma Ruth had been manipulated by my obvious favoritism. Tessa had moved out of our parents' house in September and into a small apartment in West Asheville. She was working at a coffee shop. She had deleted her influencer accounts. She had texted me in October, "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know I'm sober now. I'm sorry." I had not replied to that text. But I had not deleted it either. The healing was not finished. The healing, I was learning, is never finished the way people imagine. It is not a door you walk through. It is a porch you stand on, every once in a while, with a glass of sweet tea going warm in your hand, looking out at a pecan tree somebody else's daughter has hung a swing from. Ruth had been right. She had always been right. When the time comes, you remember I saw you. I remember, Grandma. I remember every day. There is a particular kind of November afternoon in the Blue Ridge foothills, the kind that comes around the second week of the month, when the light goes thin and gold, and the air smells like wood smoke from somebody's chimney 3 pastures over. I drove out to the farmhouse on a Saturday like that, the 14th of November, almost exactly 1 year after the morning Harold Whitfield knocked on a conference room door in Asheville. I had told Maria I was coming. She had insisted on baking. When I pulled into the driveway, June was on the front porch in a small red sweater, holding a wooden spoon and watching for me, and when she saw my car she shouted Miss Claire and ran inside to tell her mother. The pecan tree was bare. The leaves were down. There was a swing on the lowest branch, the kind made from a single plank of cedar and 2 lengths of rope, and a bicycle propped against the porch steps that Daniel had clearly been teaching June to ride. Maria met me at the door with flour on her hands and a baby on her hip. The baby's name was Ruth. They had asked me, the week she was born, if I would mind. I had cried in their kitchen for 15 minutes. I had not minded. We sat on the back porch with coffee while June ran in the yard. Maria had set up a small table out there, and on the table was a plate of biscuits and a jar of honey and a vase with 3 sprigs of rosemary from the herb garden she had planted along the south wall. The chair I sat in was the same chair Ruth had sat in the August she told me she saw me. Maria did not know that. Maria had bought the chair at an estate sale in Weaverville. The chair had come home on its own. I sat in it for a long time without saying anything, and Maria let me, because Maria had learned. The way the people who keep us sane always learn, when to talk and when to leave a person to her own porch. I want to tell you about the people who showed up that year. Not the ones who didn't. You already know about them. I want to tell you about the people who did, because every story like this is really a story about both columns, and the second column is the one that matters in the end. Harold Whitfield turned 78 in March. I drove down for his birthday lunch at the little place on Main Street, and I gave him a leather notebook I had bought from a bindery in West Asheville. He gave me a wooden box, hand-carved by his brother-in-law in Brevard, with a small brass plate on the lid that said simply for Claire, who showed up. I keep it on my dresser. I keep Ruth's letter inside it. Joyce sends me a Christmas card every year. Last December's card had a photograph of her 3 grandchildren in matching plaid pajamas. And on the inside, in her round, careful handwriting, she had written, "Your grandmother would have liked you very much, sweetheart." Denise is the nurse who sat with me the night of the reading. She drove over to my apartment that Friday at 9 in the evening, on her own dinner break, with a bottle of red wine and a foil-wrapped plate of macaroni and cheese her mother had made. She did not ask me to talk. She just sat on my couch and watched the same documentary I was half watching, and at midnight she went home. And on Monday she did not ask me at work how I was doing. because she knew I would not have been able to answer yet. Denise is the kind of friend you only get if you have already learned to be the same kind of friend back. We have coffee every Wednesday now, at a diner on Tunnel Road, in a booth the waitress saves for us without being asked. There were others. A woman from the hospice named Pat, 63 years old, who had buried her own mother the year before, and who slid a folded piece of paper across the table to me one afternoon with the words, "If you ever need to talk to somebody who's been there," and her phone number. A woman from my apartment building named Aisha, who started knocking on my door on Sunday evenings with leftover Ethiopian food her husband had cooked too much of. A man named Theo at the bookstore on Haywood Road, who started setting aside used paperbacks for me, mostly memoirs by women who had survived their own families and who never asked why I was reading them. These are the people who became my family, not the people I was born to. The people who looked at me and decided, without being asked, that I was worth showing up for. I want you to think about your own list, the one you carry in your head, of who has shown up for you. I want you to think about it not as a sentimental exercise but as an inventory. Who came to the hospital? Who answered the phone at 2 in the morning? Who said "I see you" without needing you to perform anything in return? Those people are your real family. Whatever last name you share with anyone else is a footnote. I want to tell you, before this story ends, about the last conversation I had with my father. It happened in October, a month before that Saturday on the porch. He came to the hospice. I did not know he was coming. He walked into the front lobby at 3 in the afternoon, in his good gray suit and a tie I had not seen since I was a teenager, and the receptionist called back to my floor and told me I had a visitor. I went down. He was standing by the fish tank with his hands in his coat pockets. He had lost weight. His hair, what was left of it, had gone fully white. We did not hug. We sat in the small family conference room down the hall from the front desk, the room where I had explained to 1,000 families that their person was not going to wake up. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he said. "Okay, I'm not asking you to come back. Okay." He looked at his hands. "I knew, Claire. About the will. About your grandmother's. I knew the year she signed it. Your grandmother told me on the back porch one afternoon, the same porch you used to push her chair onto, and she asked me to keep it from your mother, and I did. For 2 months I kept it, and then I told your mother, because I was afraid not to. I told her, and your mother sat in the kitchen and cried for an hour. And then she stopped crying, and she said, 'We will simply behave as if it does not exist.' And I let her say that. I did not stop her. I did not call Mr. Whitfield. I did not tell you. For 8 years I let her say that, and I sat at the table, and I ate the food you brought, and I let you pay for my prescriptions, and I knew the whole time. I did not say anything for a long time. Why are you telling me this now, Dad? Because I'm dying." He said it quietly. He had been diagnosed in August. Pancreatic, stage 4. They had given him 6 to 9 months. He had not told my mother. He had not told my brother. He had only told me in a hospice conference room, on a Tuesday afternoon, almost a year after the morning I had walked out of Gerald Boone's office without looking back. I did not cry. I had cried for my father for 40 years already, in advance, the way useful daughters cry. I was out of tears for him by then. What I felt, sitting across from him in that small beige room, was something quieter and stranger. I felt the last weight of him lifting off me. Not because I forgave him. I did not forgive him. I felt it lifting because he had finally, after a lifetime of letting other people speak for him, said the true sentence out loud. "I'm sorry, Dad, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry for me, Claire. I'm sorry for the man you could have been." He nodded. He looked at the carpet. He stood up. "Will you come?" "To what?" "At the end." I thought about it for a long time, long enough that he looked up at me. "Yes, Dad, I'll come." He nodded once, and he walked out, and that was the last conversation we ever had as two healthy people in a room. I went to his bedside in February. He died on a Thursday, the 7th, at 4:42 in the morning. I was the one holding his hand. My mother was on the other side of the bed, and she did not look at me, and I did not look at her, and we both held him while he went, and afterward I drove home, and I slept for 14 hours, and when I woke up the world was still there. My mother and I have not spoken since the funeral. I do not know if we ever will. I have learned to be honest with myself about that. Some mothers do not come back, and some daughters do not go back, and the dignity is not in pretending otherwise. The dignity is in not pretending at all. So, there it is, the whole story. or the part of it I know how to tell you. I want to say one last thing, and I want to say it directly to you. Because you have been here with me for a long time now, and the least I can do is look up from the page and speak to your face. Being chosen by the right person matters more than being chosen by everyone. You can spend a whole life trying to be loved by people who only know how to use you. And at the end of that life, you will be tired, and you will be unsurprised, and you will be empty. Or you can let one person see you. One grandmother on a back porch, one friend on a Friday night with a foil-wrapped plate, one old attorney in a bow tie above a hardware store. One stranger on the other end of a comment section who writes me too, Claire, my mother did the same thing to me. That is the chosen family. That is the only family that holds. I want you to do something for me before you go. I want you to tell me, in the comments, the name of the person who saw you. Not the people who used you. The one who saw you. It might be your grandmother. It might be a teacher. It might be a stranger at a bus stop in 1997 who said one kind thing to you on a day you almost did not make it. Tell me their name. Tell me where you were listening from. I read every comment, and I read every name, and I think the people who saw us, alive or gone, deserve to be said out loud one more time. If this story stayed with you, if it touched something tender or angry or healing in you, then please consider subscribing to this channel. There are more stories coming. There are more women who survived their own families coming. You will not be alone here. But for tonight, that is enough. Wherever you are, whoever you are, whatever kitchen or car or quiet room you are sitting in right now, I hope someone has seen you today. And if no one has, then let me be the first. I see you. Good night.